Alrighty, we might get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So today our webinar is on rental water responsibilities and how to fix problems with your energy or water provider. So my name is Sarah Walker and I work in the sector development team here at QCOS. I would just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're facilitating this workshop today, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. QCOS would also like to thank First Nations peoples for the gift of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and we look forward to supporting work leading to a successful referendum to enshrine a First Nations voice to Parliament in the Australian Constitution, followed by Makarrata and Treaty. We'd also like to encourage you to take a moment to use the chat function to let us know which traditional lands you're dialing in from today. We always have people from various parts of Queensland online, so it's a lovely way to acknowledge the breadth of country and connection to land of our First Nations peoples. So this webinar today will cover the rights, roles and responsibilities of tenants and landlords in relation to water charges, and we'll also cover the process to resolving disputes with your electricity or water providers. And we've got two guest speakers joining us online today. So our first guest speaker is Mark Fiddler from the Residential Tenancies Authority. Mark is a Senior Community Education Officer. And the Residential Tenancies Authority is a state government statutory authority that helps make renting work for everyone. And the RTA provides tenancy advice, tenancy information and support, bond management, dispute resolution, investigations and prosecutions, and education services. So today, Mark will talk us through the role of the RTA and the obligations for tenants with regards to water charging under the legislation. We'll then have Sandy Cummings join us, who is an Investigation and Resolution Officer at the Energy and Water Ombudsman Queensland, also known as EWOC. EWOC helps Queenslanders work out problems with their electricity, gas and water providers. And today, Sandy will talk us through common issues facing tenants, how EWOC can help, what they can help with, and she'll also present some case study examples of how certain issues were resolved. So if you've got any questions while Mark or Sandy are speaking, please pop your questions in the chat function and we will address them after each presentation. And I just wanted to also acknowledge a few housekeeping things. If you could keep yourself on mute while the presentations are happening, that would be great. And of course, once those presentations are finished, you're welcome to ask questions and you can do that via the chat or by taking yourself off mute. Wonderful. Thanks everyone again for coming along today. And I'm going to hand over firstly to Mark from the RTA for his presentation. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I'll just get this screen up here. So hopefully you can all see that. As Sarah said, my name is Mark Fiddler. I've been with the RTA for about 18 years. That time has predominantly been in our contact centre and support area. And I have spent a lot of years answering questions about water charging sections of our legislation. So hopefully you can be reasonably confident in the information that I'm providing to you today. Before we do start, I would also like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country and their continuing connection with land, water and culture. We pay our respects to traditional owners and to elders past, present and emerging. So as Sarah indicated, we will run through very quickly the role of the RTA today, the general obligations of landlords and tenants, and then we'll have a look at what the legislation says about water charging and the practical side of the legislation. We'll quick look at the agreement and then discuss resolving disputes. So the core function of the Residential Tenancies Authority is to administer Queensland tenancy laws. So the Residential Tenancies and Rooming Accommodation Act of 2008 and the associated regulations. So most people are aware that we hold the bonds and we have a contact centre that will take calls. We also offer tenancy information, education and support to increasing the community's awareness and understanding of rights and responsibilities, along with working with organisations such as QCOS to bring today's session. We also work with tenant organisations such as Tenants Queensland and QStars. We also provide webinars and podcasts which are available on our website. And as we mentioned, we do offer a free dispute resolution service to help disputing parties resolve issues without legal action. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, we do have a compliance area. She did mention prosecution. We're not quite that heavy-handed, although if we need to, we will be. But we try and look at our compliance area more through enforcement, in education than enforcement. But again, there are sections of the legislation that have offence provisions, so it is worth knowing what they are and making sure that you're working within those. So just in relation to the landlord and tenant obligations generally, you're probably all reasonably much aware of these. The landlord must ensure that the property meets health and safety laws. They must allow the tenant quiet enjoyment, comply with entry rules, carry out repairs and maintenance, and comply with the terms of the agreement. Now, obviously, there are some changes coming to the legislation with minimum housing standards. And I will provide a little bit of information about that later and direct you in the where to get information on that. So when it comes to the repairs and maintenance side of things, that will be important. There's nothing really changes in regards to water charging with all of the current changes. So we don't. What I'm providing to you today in regards to water charging legislation won't change come the 1st of September. So the tenant's responsibility is to pay rent on time, obviously keep the place clean. The word tidy is on there, and yes, it's a responsibility, but I don't like that word tidy in a lot of instances. There's some responsibilities on the tenant to keep the place clean in regards to its condition at the start of the tenancy. But if an inspection is being done and the place isn't tidy, that's not really an offence or a breachable thing from a landlord's perspective. Tenant mustn't interfere with the peace, comfort, and privacy of a neighbour. They have a responsibility to report any repairs or damage, and that, when we talk about the water side of things, can be important. And they must also comply with the terms of the agreement. So when it comes to water charging, the first thing that we need to consider is what needs to be in place for the tenant to be responsible for the consumable water costs at the premises. So is the property individually metered? Now, most houses will be individually metered, but if you're renting a granny flat or if there's a separate agreement for upstairs and downstairs areas, and the property is on 1 metre, then you may not necessarily be responsible for water. Water cost cannot be proportioned across premises. So, for example, if there's a block of 4 units with 1 metre, you can't split it 25% each. A lot of new units have individual meters, so it's not uncommon for a tenant to be charged for water in a unit block. The other thing, does your agreement state that you're responsible for water? And we'll have a look at the particular sections of the agreement that need to be ticked. But if it's yes, then you are responsible. If it's no, then you can't be asked to pay. And finally, is the property water efficient? So we'll touch on this on the next slide. Now, in regards to special terms for an agreement, so if there's a pool at the property, or if there's lawns and gardens that need to be maintained, or if there's an automatic watering system, for example. So in those circumstances, there may be a requirement or a reasonable reason for the lessor to actually provide a certain amount of water to cover those particular things. So it's worth making sure that you're aware of what your responsibilities are at the start of the tenancy, and if there needs to be some consideration around water costs taken into those things. So this little excerpt that's on the screen there is from our water charging fact sheet, and we would encourage you to go and have a look at that if you want to keep a copy of that. It's a pretty well read fact sheet, and it does include a lot of information around what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And quite simply, if the property is not individually metered, the tenant can't be charged for water. When it does come to individually metered, the definition under our legislation means that there is a meter that has been installed or approved by a supply authority and measures for the premises only the quantity of something supplied to or used at the premises. So in a situation I mentioned before, unit blocks, for example, quite often they'll have a single meter that comes in and is read, but then there's individual meters to each of the unit blocks. Now, they may not be the one that the water charge is billed off, but if it's individually metered and they can be determined what the cost of water is, or sorry, what the amount of usage is for that particular unit, then the tenant can be charged in that situation. So if we have a look quickly at the table on there, so is individually metered, then, or if it's not, then all bets are off. The lessor is responsible for water. If the agreement doesn't state that the tenant must pay, then again, the lessor is responsible for water. And then we look at the water efficiency aspect of things. Now, if the property is for a period of time is not water efficient, or if it's individually metered and the tenant's responsible, but the property is not water efficient, then the lessor must pay for a reasonable amount of water. Again, it's worth making sure that the tenancy agreement states what that reasonable amount is going to be, or how much the lessor is going to be responsible for. So in regards to the 18A itself, you'll see on there, so item 12, what are the services that the tenant is responsible for, and then the is 12.2 is the tenant required to pay for water, so yes or no. So if it's not ticked there, then the tenant can't be responsible, but if it is ticked, then the tenant, as long as the property again is individually metered and is water efficient, will be responsible. So it's important that you fill out your tenancy agreement correctly, and make sure again that if there's anything, pools, gardens, any of those particular things, that there's something written into the special terms as well. The other thing that I would also recommend is that if you are filling forms out, whether it is the tenancy agreement to start the tenancy or any of our forms, always ensure that you're downloading the forms from our website. With all of the legislative changes that have been made recently, there's been a lot of our forms have been updated as well. So if you do have stock of old forms sitting around, they may not actually be current. So make sure that you're downloading your forms from our website to make sure that they're current. For the entry condition report, and just from the aspect of making a note of the meter reading at the start of the tenancy. So once the agreement's been signed and the details regarding water efficiency and everything, they should be included on the entry condition report. It might seem like a mundane thing to do, but as a part of the tenant completing the entry condition report, it could be worth checking a few of the taps for correct flow rates. So when it comes to water efficiency, your internal cold water taps, single mixer taps and any shower heads, they must have a flow rate of 9 litres per minute. Taps for bathtubs and appliances, like for washing machines and things, are excluded. But again, if you're looking for the specifics around these things, the water charging fact sheet does include all of that information. It's probably a good idea also for both parties to be taking a photo of the meter reading at the start of a tenancy. Now, in regards to payment requirements and what you're responsible for, now this bill copy is fairly old, but it does give us a bit of an idea as to the different things that can be shown on the bill. So you'll see there that the state bulk water charge is based on the amount of usage, and that is payable by the tenant, as is the distributor cost of the water. But when you get down to the lower part of the bill, the water service charge, sewerage services, and in this case, I think it might have been a commercial bill, but trade waste is also covered on there. They're fixed costs, as much as some of them may be based on the amount of water used at the premises, they're not costs that can be passed on to the tenant. So the state bulk water charge and the Tier 1 usage charge are what can be passed on to the tenant. So the tenant has a month to pay after being given copies of the relevant documents about the incurring of the amount. Generally, it should be a copy of the bill, if possible, but at a minimum, it should show the amount of usage, the cost per kilolitre, and the total amount owed. Just being given an amount is probably not acceptable. The other thing to be conscious of here too is that rent is rent. So if you make a payment of rent at the same time, for example, that you've got an outstanding water bill, the rent can't be used to cover that water bill. And you cannot charge late fees for a payment of a water bill. So if a water bill is outstanding, you really need to go through the breach process after the month that the tenant has had to pay has passed, then you can issue the breach notice and take it through dispute if need be. So just to recap, in regards to the charging aspect of things, tenants should check their agreement at the start of the tenancy to see what they are responsible for. You should be provided with a copy of your proposed agreement prior to committing to the tenancy, so you can see before you've actually committed to the tenancy what you'll be responsible for. Check the special terms of the agreement to see if any of those things that I mentioned, pools, gardens, or anything like that, if you're responsible for any of those, and then you would be looking to negotiate your water costs around some of that as well. If you're happy with the terms and conditions of the agreement, then you can sign it, and then you want to check your entry condition report to make sure that it's filled out properly, that it shows the property is individually metered, that it includes your meter reading, and it also that it indicates that the property is water efficient. There isn't any formal certification around whether it's water efficient or not. Some plumbers used to provide a water efficiency certificate, but it's not gazetted or it's not part of our suite of forms. But the sorts of things that you're looking for, things like the label that I've shown there on the screen, plumbing reports, receipts, copies of packaging to show that the water efficiency devices are on there and those sorts of things. But the easiest thing is to, if you need to, is do a physical check to check those flow rates. So a couple of things to note is that your tenancy period and your water charging periods will probably not match up. So tenants are recommended to question at the start how often and when water is billed. Landlords should ensure that bills are passed on regularly, and if they're attempting to provide multiple bills at the end of a tenancy, QCAP might not support this. The previous rulings have stated that it's unreasonable for a lessor to withhold water charges and issue an invoice that covers a significant period and a significant amount. One thing that I do suggest in conversations with tenants on the phone, if you're not getting a water bill and you know that you are responsible, take it upon yourself to ask your lessor or your agent for that water bill. Sort of look at it as if your phone, for example, was through Telstra or Optus and you weren't getting that phone bill regularly, you'd be contacting them to find out what's going on. And in some regards, you have that same responsibility around water in these situations. It's not something that you can sit back and say, well, they haven't given me a bill, I should just ignore it. Now, the other thing here, I mentioned earlier around the special terms of agreement, especially if pools or gardens are to be maintained. The other thing that a tenant can't do or can't be expected to do is if there are council water restrictions in place. Now, even if the tenancy agreement says that the pool needs to be topped up or the gardens need to be watered, if there's council water restrictions in place, the tenant has a responsibility to abide by those council restrictions. So that's where you need to start to have a conversation with your lessor and work out what's going to happen there. But the tenant can't be breaking the restriction laws. And then finally, if the property has tank water, then the tenant can be responsible for the cost of the tank water in that situation as well. It's not often that this occurs, but something to be conscious of. So very quickly, communication is the key to resolving most disputes. Conflict can arise as a result of poor communication or a lack of information and knowledge. So we ask the parties to be clear and respectful and careful with language. If you're not sure, ask questions to get the information that you need to make decisions. So disputes about water generally fall into a couple of categories. The first is during the tenancy and often relates to water efficiency or lack thereof, or water leaks or dripping taps and those sorts of things. So, if there's a leak, if the tenant is advising the lessor, as soon as they become aware of it, then you'd expect that it gets fixed. If it's left for too long, then the tenant may not necessarily be responsible for all of the water that is charged through that period. So it is a responsibility to do your repairs in a timely manner, but also from the tenant's perspective to let the landlord know or the agent know if there is something that needs to be repaired. So that's the first thing that we generally see. And then the second one is generally around water bills at the end of the tenancy. And I mentioned before, multiple bills or large amounts at the end of the tenancy. And we look at the dispute process as a three-step process. Firstly, the self-resolution and the communication. And you've heard me mention, communicate throughout the tenancy. In a lot of instances, these sorts of things can be self-resolved. If you're unable to self-resolve them, though, then we do have a free dispute resolution service. So you can make the application, depending on which party, and then we'll speak to both parties through that conciliation process. If we're able to resolve it, then the agreement becomes a part of the tenancy agreement. The dispute agreement ultimately becomes a part of the tenancy agreement. And then if it's not resolved, then the matter can go off to the Civil and Administrative Tribunal, QCAT, and that's where the tribunal will make a decision. Now, through our dispute process, the parties can work together and both have some say in the outcome. If it does go to the tribunal, then whatever decision that the referee makes will be the final decision, and you don't have a lot of say in it. So it's beneficial to be able to self-resolve or certainly work it out through our conciliation process. So just quickly, I did mention minimum housing standards. They will be coming in on the 1st of September. As I said, there's no changes to the water charging side of things, but premises must have adequate plumbing and drainage and be connected to hot and cold water that is suitable for drinking. Premises must provide privacy in the bathroom areas and have flushable toilets connected to a sewer, septic tank or other waste disposal system. And they must also include the necessary fixtures for a functional laundry, such as tap fixtures and adequate plumbing, if laundry facilities are provided. You don't have to provide white goods, but all the bits and pieces to hook up those white goods need to be provided. And that's as much as I'll touch on in regards to the minimum housing standards. I'd encourage you, if you are looking or want to know about the minimum housing standards, to jump onto our website, the rental law changes. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is keep an eye on our events page, because we are doing some sessions around minimum housing standards across the state and in Brisbane. So if you do want to jump along or get along to one of those sessions and learn more about it, then feel free to avail yourself of that information and come along to those sessions. So just quickly, from a self-promotion aspect of things, I suppose. So we do have our e-news that we send out each month, and I would encourage anyone to jump on and subscribe, and we can keep you informed of any of the changes, the minimum housing standards, for example, or when those events are going to be. We have our webinars and short videos through our YouTube channel and our podcast as well. Now, one thing that we have updated our website with recently is that we have just had our 17A, the information statement, translated into a number of different languages, and they are now all available on our website. So if you do have tenants of non-English speaking backgrounds and you want to be able to assist them, then hopefully one of those translated 17As will be useful for you. So that's it for me at the moment. Sarah, did we have any questions while I was mumbling away there.
Thanks so much, Mark. That was a really fantastic overview. We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment, but
That's all
does
right.
anyone have any questions? You're welcome to take yourself off mute to ask a question if you have one.
I must have been incredibly thorough.
Absolutely. I think you were very thorough. Well, if any of you think of sort of questions as we're going along, feel free to pop it in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much, Mark. That was a really great overview, and that was great the way you touched on the minimum housing standard as well. So just to clarify, that comes into effect from September this year for new tenancies, and then September 2024 for all tenancies?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Great. And yeah, we'd really encourage you all to make use of the resources on the RTA website that Mark spoke about as well. I think it's fantastic that you've got those resources for people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds as well. That's really helpful. Awesome.
All
Well,
right.
now I'm going to hand over to Sandy from the Energy and Water Ombudsman. Sandy, Mark, are you happy to stop sharing your screen and then we'll get Sandy
Yep.
to put your presentation up? Wonderful.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sarah, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks, Sandy.
Okay, terrific. Hi, everybody. My name's Sandy from the Energy and Water Ombudsman's Office. I'm an Investigation and Conciliation Officer. The Energy and Water Ombudsman also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the land, seas and waters where we meet today. We recognise their continuing connection to the culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Okay. Now, this is from Joan. What we do basically is providing Queenslanders an independent and effective way of resolving disputes with their energy and water suppliers, and also gas as well, as long as it's natural gas. Now, when customers come to our office, they come to us with a multitude of different reasons why they're calling us. It could be high billing. They want to know their rights and responsibilities before contacting their electricity providers or their service providers. It could even be for water as well. Now, we also facilitate contact between customers, their energy and water providers. We have a service that with some retailers that we are able to transfer them directly through to the retailer to have a chat with them. So basically the customer would tell us what the matter is and we would then get them to hold, and if they're one of our scheme participants that are within that service, we are able to warm transfer them to finish negotiations with their retailer at that time whilst they're on the phone. Okay, we also do independent investigations of complex and unresolved disputes. So if you've been to the water, or just say for a scenario, if you've been to the water place and you've got a billing issue and you can't get it resolved, we can absolutely have a look at that as long as it's within our jurisdiction. Okay, we also negotiate resolutions between customers and their energy and water providers. We provide referrals if the issue is outside of our jurisdiction. So if it's in relation to a solar matter or bulk hot water or something like that, we would refer you to the correct department where you need to be to get that assistance. We identify other needs and provide appropriate referrals as to where they need to be. Now, the complaint types that we get are high bills and disputed accounts, negotiating payment arrangement for customers that are in hardship or for payment arrangements that have been declined. We can assist with negotiating that between the customer and the provider. Now, we also do disconnections or restriction of supply. We help customers get their rebates that they're entitled to and their concession. With the removal of the default, in regards to that, they will only ever remove a default if it's been listed in error, but we can investigate to confirm whether it's been done correctly as according to the credit reporting code. Okay, we can't guarantee an actual removal of the default, but we can definitely investigate it to confirm whether it's been applied correctly or not. We also do a lot of poor customer service or incorrect information or advice that's been provided by the electricity entities and water entities, and anything to do with misleading marketing practices, damage to property, certain claims that can be put through for review for our office. So there's like a compensation claim. There is a process that customers have to follow before we even can take that on. So we would advise the customer of that process and let them know what we can do in regards to that. Embedded network complaints, that's only just started coming through. We've taken that responsibility on from last year. Now, there are some things that we don't do in relation to embedded networks. It's mainly for small residential customers only. Just basically any business is out of our jurisdiction due to the class that it is. So we're all still learning on that one. So there's still a lot to go. But by all means, anybody can give us a call at any time and we can get that information for them and pop them through to who they need to go to. Okay. Now, these are the things that we cannot deal with. Tenants' water bills received from landlords or real estate agents. For that reason, it's what we on on-selling. So if the account's not in the tenant's name and it's in a third party's name, that's what we class as on-selling. But there are ways around that, which I'll explain a little bit later on. Now, we also can't deal with disputes about the cost of energy or water, but we can refer you to the people that you need to go to if that's what you wanted to dispute. We also don't do bottled, metered or reticulated LPG gas or bulk hot water supply. And we can't give people the eligibility to say, yes, they're entitled to solar rebates, they're not entitled to. But we can confirm, like we could do an investigation or we can get the retailer to contact the customer to see what they are eligible for. So there's different sides, some things that we can do and some things that we can't do. Now, a large business customer over the usage threshold, that is generally around 1.6 megawatt hours per annum, so 160,000 kilowatt hours. They are out of our jurisdiction and they are classed as a large market customer. So we're sort of more for the small businesses and the mums and dad businesses and just general mums and dads and single people in general. And complaints against or from any other government department, we can't do either. But people can still call us and we would let them know, like if they're never sure, they can still call us and we would let them know who they need to go to. Okay, so these are some of the common issues facing tenants, which are high disputed water bills, difficulty in establishing electricity and accounts due to the poor credit. We do a lot of helping customers because the electricity providers and some water providers can reject providing a customer a service due to their poor credit history. However, we can assist with that. Now, even if they're moving out from a property and they're not closing the accounts or thinking other people in the house will take responsibility, if the account's in their name, we can assist with that. Now, not being aware of all the utility services connected to the property, electricity, hot water, gas, cooktops, gas, hot water, or failing to provide a forwarding address for final billing. So there's lots of different things that fall into those categories. So if anybody wants to ask any questions after, I'm happy to talk you through it. Concessions not being applied in boarding houses and joint living arrangements, and accounts having to remain in the name of the landlord, and the financial impact from DFB or utilities used as a means of control. So there's some of the issues that we see. So this is one of the case studies, how we've helped a customer. So Sue was connected to our office via a financial counsellor. She was helped to identify which energy provider that had her existing billing rights to her property. We provided Sue with the information about her rights to establish an electricity account for the current provider for the site. We connected the parties through that warm transfer process, which I spoke about earlier. We explained the circumstances to the electricity provider, and we assured that they were aware of their responsibilities to establish an account for the customer. We also do follow-ups with the customer. So there was a follow-up done with Sue, confirmed she'd been connected and it had been completed. We provided her with additional information regarding the action she could take to dispute or update the status of a default listing. So that's just one of the studies. Now, this one's another case study. Terry received a high bill from his landlord after the concealed water leak was identified at his rental property. Terry was referred to our office by a water provider who could not help as he was not the authorised person on the water account. We explained that we were also required an authority to act form, which we have on our website. So if you aren't the account holder and you're acting on behalf of the person that is the account holder, an authority to act form or verbal authority needs to be provided due to privacy laws before we can assist. So that was provided. We established a concealed leak had been found at the property and resulted in a high bill. The water usage charges were billed to Terry. Our investigation identified the account holder was eligible for a concealed leak remission, and it was incorrectly denied by the provider. So we negotiated for the remission to be applied at the pension concession rate, which included the state bulk water charges because Terry held an eligible concession card. The account holder appreciated the assistance provided by our office and paid the bill in full without passing on any charges onto Terry. So next slide. So helping customers. So if you've got an issue with like water, gas or electricity, we would probably recommend that you act quickly because there are some consequences that can happen if you just avoid them. So you're better off acting quickly and referring them to contact who the provider is straight away. If they just to make sure if they don't think the debt is correct. Raise a complaint. So you've always got to raise a complaint with the company that the complaint's about first. We've got to provide them a reasonable opportunity to know about the complaint and resolve the complaint with the customer in the first instance. And they can then say how they want the problem resolved. Keep records of everything. So request copies of bills, account statements, keep notes, conversations of emails sent and received, and then refer them to contact us if the problem's not fixed. The customer should raise a complaint with our office. They don't need to wait. We do have a jurisdictional responsibility of 12 months. So if somebody's got a complaint from 5 years ago, they've left it too long, we can't go back that far. Some of the retailers can go back that far. So, however, our jurisdiction is only for the 12 months. But we have gone back in some circumstances. If the issue's been going on, say, for 5 years and it's still happening today, we can do that, okay? So, these are some ways that you can contact our office. You can submit a complaint online. You can chat live with us online. You can email us at complaints, or you can just call the toll-free number, the 1-800 number. We've got 3 offices, one in Brisbane, one in Rockhampton and one in Cairns. You can also go and walk in and have a chat. If you needed somebody to go through something with you, you've got that opportunity to do that. And we also, if somebody needs an interpreter, we also do have interpreter services available as well. Okay. And any questions?
Thanks, Sandy. That was really
That's
great.
okay.
We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment, but I just wanted to ask, I noticed on that slide before you mentioned water in Southeast Queensland only. Are there any other services
Yes.
in sort of other parts of Queensland that relate to that?
So We do the ones that are in southeast Queensland. So like Gold Coast City Council, there's Unity Water, there's Urban Utilities, and a couple of others. But if the water's not within our jurisdiction, it would generally go to, because it's from a council, because some councils aren't within our jurisdiction, we would refer those people to the Queensland Ombudsman's office. Okay, they've got the water that's not within our jurisdiction, so that's where we would refer them to.
Great, thanks for that, Sandy.
That's okay.
Well, it looks like you also provided a very comprehensive overview. Everyone's, got all that information now. Oh, Sandy, you're just sharing your emails there. I should
Oh,
just
sorry.
let you know. No, that's okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure what's
There we go.
happening
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, everyone, for attending once again. I just want to say a big thank you to Mark and Sandy for speaking today and sharing such valuable information. And as I mentioned in the chat, we will be sending out a post-event email with the slides from today and a recording of the session. We've also got a poll that will appear on your screen shortly. So if you could fill that in, that would be much appreciated. And just to let you know, we do have another webinar coming up on the 9th of May. That one will be on reducing energy costs for clients. So that will focus on understanding energy use, concessions, and hardship options. So we hope that you can join us then. I'll just pop a link for that one in the chat here. So if you haven't already registered for that one, we'd really encourage you to come along, especially with energy costs being so high at the moment. I think it will be a really great session to learn how we can all reduce our bills. And if you have any other essential services webinar requests that are related to water or energy, please let QCOS know. We're always happy to hear suggestions. So that's it for today. We're going to gift you 15 minutes back in your day, which I'm sure you'll use wisely. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming along today, and keep an eye out for that post-event email.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
And thanks
Bye.
again to our presenters.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Thanks.